Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Raposa, Managing Director of Public and Government Affairs for AAA Northeast. Welcome to another in our series of webinars and conversations with newsmakers on a series of traffic safety issues. Today, we're thrilled to have the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety with us as we talk about aggressive driving and road rage, very timely topics at this time of year. Recently, the foundation, through its Traffic Safety Culture Index, released some information about aggressive driving. And as you can imagine, it got a lot of media attention in these parts, as it always has. It's a topic everybody has an opinion on, because apparently it is something that virtually everybody does. So the report from the foundation talked about how many people take aggressive actions, the difference between men and women, and several other topics. And I hope you're all sitting down when I tell you that apparently men are more aggressive drivers than women, even though women are not off the hook here when it comes to aggressive actions. And when it comes to age, younger drivers are all aggressive. Male, female, does not matter. So with us today, from our foundation, are Dr. Tara Kelley-Baker, who is with the Data and Information Group, and Senior Analyst Woon Kim, the same group, Dr. Woon Kim. Tara, you'll appreciate the fact that it's cold up here and dark up here in December. I know you did some of your schooling in Boston, so you probably don't miss what today is like. I did notice that you both went to school at the University of Maryland, and that concerns me a little bit because it makes me wonder if people in Maryland are bad drivers, since you're both into traffic safety research. So I hope that's not the case. My experience with driving through Maryland on the highway is that people drive very, very fast, but I suspect that's the same in all 50 states. So welcome to you both. I'm thrilled you could be here. And Tara, maybe we could start with you, and you can talk a little bit about the Traffic Safety Culture Index in general, what it is, how often it comes out, and what its purpose is.
Would love to. Okay, so thank you very much, Dave. And by the way, today is not a very gorgeous day, and it's pretty cold here too. Maybe not quite as cold as Boston, but it's pretty cold. And fear the turtle, right, Woon? So we are definitely Maryland alumni. However, Woon actually has a degree in engineering, and mine is more in developmental psychology. So it's fun to work with Woon because we have really different backgrounds, and I think you'll hear the differences in how we discuss the results today. But let me start with telling you a little bit about the Traffic Safety Culture Index survey. So next slide. Yeah, here we go. All right. So what we refer to as the TSCI, this survey seeks to understand people's perceptions and their attitudes, as well as look at their behaviors around different risky driving behaviors. Like when I talk about risky driving behaviors, I don't just mean speeding like we're talking about today, but also distracted driving, drowsy driving, and impaired driving, both by alcohol, prescription drugs, and cannabis. So we have a multitude of measures that look at risky driving behavior. We do the survey annually. Actually, we've been doing it for over a decade now. And each year, we have over 3,000 participants who are age 16 or older. Next slide. All right, so let me tell you a little bit more about the measurements. And then, again, we're focusing today on aggressive driving, but we do have multiple measures of different risk behaviors. And when we ask the questions in our survey, we ask our participants about their perceptions around the dangers of impaired driving, the dangers of speeding. We ask them about their risk of apprehension. So how likely they feel they would be caught by the police if they were to engage in that type of behavior. And then the third perception measure that we assess is how likely they believe that people who are important to them, their friends and their family, would actually approve of them engaging in that type of behavior. So we have kind of a triangulation that really looks at the perceptions around the risk behaviors that they may or may not be engaging in. And then of course, we have to ask about their own behavior. So we ask about whether or not they engaged in that behavior in the last 30 days. And finally, our survey ends with questions about policy. So how much they support a policy or oppose one. That question in particular is really important for our AAA groups and clubs because it gives us a sense of how important these policies are for our groups to be doing advocacy work and also to eventually assess whether those policies are useful. So that's really a general overview. Just a reminder that the survey does take place every year, and if you go to our foundation website, you'll see that at least for the last few years, we have them published so you can take a look at them. And I'll let Woon tell you about the results of this study.
So Woon, let me tee this up for you a little bit. When we talk about this, certainly in our comments with the media and with members, it all starts with do as I say, not as I do. We all think that aggressive driving behaviors or drinking and driving or a whole bunch of things are terrible, yet apparently we all do them anyway. So what have you found? What do you see in the study that explains that a little bit?
Yeah, the slide on the screen that gives a very good summary of this discordance. So this graph shows that the discordance between drivers' perception and their behavior is quite prevalent, not only for the aggressive driving behavior, but also for other risky driving behavior, like the drowsy driving behavior or distracted driving behavior. So, for example, nearly 90% of drivers viewed red light running as very or extremely dangerous, but also about 1/3 of drivers also admitted to having done so at least once in the past 30 days before the survey.
So, and that probably falls across a whole bunch of different activities, whether it's red light running, it could be, well, just about anything. Talking on your cell phone might be a great example of something that everybody thinks is terrible and that everybody does anyway. So it does seem to be something that falls throughout. Now, here in Rhode Island, one of the things that's been very noticeable this year is that the number of fatalities, which you might have thought would go down, actually has been going up and is close to 2017 levels, which was a very bad year in this state. And when we talk to the governor's highway safety folks, they're really scratching their heads trying to figure out why. But the one thing they know is a prevalence of speeding. And I know within this research, you did take a look at speeding. So Woon, what can you tell us about what you've seen when it comes to speed and what people are doing and why?
Yeah, the speeding is definitely one of the reason, one of the most often observed aggressive driving behavior. If we go the previous slides, that actually shows about the people's perception about speeding behavior. So you can see that only about half of the drivers perceived speeding on freeway to be very or extremely dangerous. And this number, 55, is a lot smaller than the numbers for other risky driving behaviors, like here, reading and driving, which is just one type of distracted driving, is 94, and drowsy driving, 96% of drivers feel that is very or extremely dangerous. But speeding is only 55. That as a result, more drivers are likely to engage in this driving behavior. See, almost 48%, almost half of the driver also admitted to engaging in this behavior compared to other driving behaviors here. Our survey also asked in general, what is your main reason for speeding over the speed limit. And this graph shows a quick overview, good summary of the result. And you can see that about 60% of respondents answers that, well, I want to keep up with the speed of other traffic. And another 60% said, I was in a hurry. As you can see here, a lot of social norms are related to speeding. Most of those drivers who answered, this question, they intentionally did, engage in speeding. But you should remember that, increased speed would narrow your driver's peripheral view and increase the stopping distance. And that would result increase a crash risk. One of our study we did last year shows that as impact speed increase, the vehicle crashworthiness and occupant protection degrade, which indicate the crash severity and injury severity would increase. And the more details for this study will be released next month. But you should note that the average amount of saved time on for example, 5-mile trip by driving 60 miles per hour on a 40 mile per hour posted road is only about 2.5 minutes. Therefore, speeding with increased risk would not be worthwhile. You should remember that fact.
And I think that's a really important point, that people do think if they drive faster that they're going to get where they're going a lot quicker. And then, over the course of an hour, maybe, what do you save? 5 minutes if you're lucky, driving it at a higher rate of speed. I know when the pandemic first began affecting traffic and people were not driving, sure, there were people out there driving as fast as they could through New York City because they could. Now just picture you guys on the Beltway. Well, I never get to drive, 7 miles an hour, but maybe now I can, and who's going to stop me? So it's an interesting psychological thought as to why people speed. And Tara, I don't know whether you have a perspective on the psychology of speeding as to why people go out there and drive as fast as they can get away with.
Right. Well, even though my background is in developmental psychology, I'm not a counselor, I'm a researcher. So I really, I'm with you. I'm not sure I understand why people, especially these extreme speeds, it does resonate with me, the motivations. I do think that wanting to keep up with the speed of traffic makes sense as a motivation. And right now there isn't that speed of traffic that people can gauge themselves. So, I mean, sometimes the speed of traffic, it can be a protective factor if the population you're with on the road is going at a safe speed, a posted speed limit. But when it gets to the extremes and you're trying to keep up, that's when you start really getting into the dangerous zones.
And I'm not surprised that was one of the number one reasons people mention, because people get taught that the speed of traffic, more or less, is the safest speed to travel. You're all going 80, there's some real diminishing returns there. Now, the press release that went out around all over the country, and a real focus of the study was about the differences between men and women. And even though men were identified as being more aggressive than women, nobody gets a free pass here. Woon, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you found in terms of men and women, and who drives aggressively and who does what.
Well, our result, basically confirmed the perception that, David, you just mentioned, that men tend to engage in all kind of, risky driving behavior more than women. But one thing I want to point out here is no matter what, the top aggressive driving behavior that both men and women engage in the most is speeding. Okay, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I can imagine, you know, you're just out there now, you see the speed, you see the tailgating. Several years ago, and this particular study didn't do it this time, there were regional breakdowns. And one of them was about honking or making gestures at other drivers. And the research at that time showed that in the Northeast, that happened more than any other parts of the country.
Mm.
Of course, when that came out, everybody here went, yeah, of course. That's what of course that's what happens around here. So one of the statistics that showed up was, I think, close to 8 out of 10 folks admit to aggressive driving actions. Now, I would have thought 10 out of 10. I don't know who the two are that never do anything. I wonder, Woon or Tara, one of you could talk about that a little bit, what you found in terms of people who actually admit that they take these actions.
Well, so here is basically regardless of age and gender, we just try to see what percentage of people are engaged in any form of aggressive driving at least once. So yeah, that the number comes out the more exact precise number is 79%. So yeah, it's almost 8 out of 10 American drivers. They self-reported to have been engaged in any form of aggressive driving, and here the including as you said, honking the horn, showing rude gesture, and tailgating, speeding, obviously, and at least once in the past 30 days before the survey. Yeah, so it's a lot. A lot of people actually doing this kind of behavior.
One of the things about the 8 out of 10 was it was regardless of gender or age. The gender I get, I wonder if the 2 out of the 10 are the stereotypes of the older driver sitting there in the first lane on the highway with here driving 10 miles an hour under the speed limit. I don't think that's the case, but I imagine it's not a surprise that you found that crossed all different age groups in terms of aggressive behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we shouldn't present this all as just a problem. There has to be solutions. There have to be countermeasures. And I think, Tara, that AAA does have some rules of the road, if you will, that we tend to preach all the time to other drivers. Can you maybe talk about those a little bit?
Sure. I even think we list them in the slide. So let me be clear and say that, like I said before, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm a researcher, and the work we do at the foundation is research. So we rarely make recommendations. What we do is try to provide data that lends to insight into what's going on, and then we ask our clubs and AAA National, our sister groups, to really do the advocating as far as helping to develop programs or make suggestions for people. So these 6 rules are actually developed by AAA in our clubs. And they really are very sensical and very doable things that can really keep everybody safe, not just you, but everybody who you're driving with. So the first one, and probably the most important one, is follow the posted speed limit. Believe it or not, a lot of people think the posted speed limit is arbitrary. It is not. It is set there for your protection and for others. So follow it. And the second bullet, maintain adequate following distance. As you know, the closer you get to that car, the car in front of you, when you hit that brakes, you're allowing for less reaction time, and that's going to increase the severity of that crash. So keep your car's distance from the one in front of you. Of course, use your turn signals. We all have gotten lazy at some point, forget to turn our signals on. think that it's just going to be, quick. We're just going into one lane or the other. But we got to remember that we're driving with lots of people who are doing lots of different things and maybe distracted and don't know what you're doing. So your signal actually gives other drivers around you an indication of what you're doing so that they can properly behave. The other thing that's important is allow others to merge. We're all in a rush. We all seem to want to be ahead of everybody else. Slow down a little bit, be courteous, and allow people to merge. This will, not only will you be generous and kind and considerate, but you might also save your life for a life of another. And then the others, equally as important, maybe not so much you might not always think about when you're driving, but your high beams. Like sometimes we forget to turn off our high beams. This is important. Sometimes people leave their high beams on because they're annoyed by other people who forget to turn their high beams on. Either way, you're not doing yourself a favor not turning off your high beams. You may be upsetting the drivers that are coming at you, but what you're also doing is reducing the visibility between both of you. So protect yourself and use your high beams. And then last but not least is be considerate at the parking lots. We do see a lot of people who just really want to park sideways. Some people park too close to others, and so people are afraid they're going to get their cars scratched. Although this is not a driving behavior, it's something that I think our AAA clubs and friends really hope that people will do just out of courtesy to one another.
And one of the things we talk about all the time on the education front are the triggers of an aggressive activity, which is really in the eyes of the person who thinks that you cut them off without a turn signal, or,
right.
or you did that. And we try to teach folks not to do those for those reasons, that you just never know what might set somebody off who could be having a bad day, 100 different reasons why that could happen. I remember once I was driving somewhere and I was in a protected turn lane about to take a left turn. The car that was going straight at the last minute also decided to take a left turn into this plaza. Now, we didn't collide, but we were kind of nose to nose, like, okay, who's going to move? So I very rationally got out of the car and in my loud voice, I explained to the other driver how I thought that was not a very nice thing you did. The irony, of course, is that I was going to pick up donuts and coffee because I was on my way to teach a AAA defensive driving class. I was going to explain to people how not to be aggressive drivers, but I did not practice how I preached on that particular day. But that is one thing you do see, that you just don't know what sets somebody off.
That's right.
Things you can do, and maybe the biggest is don't engage with that other driver because they could follow you home. A lot of bad things can happen. The last thing I really want to touch on, and I know research is probably ongoing on this topic, but I have to wonder what the impact of COVID is on everybody's driving habits, on whether they are more aggressive, are they driving a lot, are they not driving at all? And you look ahead to the next Traffic Safety Culture Index, or I believe it's the American Driving Survey. What are you seeing from a researcher's point of view? What questions, at least, do you think are going to be addressed over the next 6 months about the impact of COVID on the driving environment?
So I'm going to field this one. I am really interested in what we're going to learn from COVID. So to begin with, another survey that we do is called the American Driving Survey. And this study looks at drivers and their trip patterns. It shows us how they drive, how often they drive, where they drive to. And this year we're preparing the report. It was a surprise, of course, when COVID hit, but we have preliminary data that indicates that people are making less trips. They're driving less miles. So the roads are in fact much lighter, and there is a lot more road space. And with this greater space on the road, as Dave, you mentioned, like more space affords them more opportunities to engage in risky behaviors like speeding and extreme speeding even. So, as we talked about before, for a lot of drivers, the motivation behind speeding is to keep up with others. And so as drivers, if we're using each other as barometers for our own behavior, that's really radically changed. So if somebody else is driving at 85 miles per hour and you're driving 65, even over the posted speed limit, kind of gives you that feeling that you need to go faster. And so that is very concerning. And we'll be able to take a closer look at that through the American Driving Survey. We're hoping to have a report out mid-next year. So, I want to share with you some research that other groups have been doing. We are working along with other groups through the Transportation Research Board, through the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, as well as others, because we're not the only ones who are interested in the behaviors around COVID and traffic safety. So according to some of the other groups that we've been working with, enforcement during COVID period has been lower. Of course, law enforcement officers have to protect themselves from COVID and have to use discretion about who they pull over and how they pull over. And so with this reduced enforcement and even the perception of reduced enforcement, that can give, I don't want to say permission, but it allows the drivers to think that they can engage in other risky driving behaviors. So not just speeding, but other behaviors like impaired driving. And so although we don't have direct data at this moment that really looks at things like impaired driving, we do know from other public health groups like NIH that alcohol sales are the highest they've been during COVID. And we also know that there's been a huge increase in opioid overdoses. So this does not prove that there's impaired driving going on the road, but it does make us aware that something's going on and that we need to take a look at it. So this year, so bringing it back to Traffic Safety Culture Index, this year we did ask questions about people's behaviors during COVID. So we asked about how they were driving back in, pre-COVID, and then we asked how they were driving recently in October. So we at different points. Now it is self-report, but we are really interested in seeing how people reported their behavior changing during COVID. We don't have anything to share with you today, but that report should be coming out probably mid-next year. So like I said, we're working with a lot of other groups on understanding COVID and learning from COVID. And I think that the general public will be really interested in hearing what we've learned.
And it probably won't come as a surprise to anybody, and I don't know whether research will measure this or not, the incredible level of distraction right now, whether it's COVID, the impact on the economy, anything else that's going on in people's lives. The impact of distractions when you're driving, I don't know if any study will show how that manifests itself. We knew before all of this happened, the problems with cell phones and infotainment systems and all the other work the foundation has sponsored. I can only imagine what people must be like now with so much on their minds. And we haven't even mentioned yet that we're into the holiday season. So put that on top of everything else. And there's a pretty good chance that that person who is looking at the road and doing everything right, their mind is probably somewhere else. So we'll be looking forward to that next year. Is there anything else about the research that we haven't touched on this year's report? I think we hit everything, but just in case, Woon, anything that we might have missed?
Well, I think that's pretty much we covered, for this analysis. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and just so you know, the foundation will be having a speeding report out next year. It's the crash report that Woon mentioned. So keep your eyes out for it. Speeding is definitely one of the areas that the foundation is really closely examining. Like other folks, we're trying to understand the motivations and some of the countermeasures that might reduce that.
And one of our most popular webinars that we did it in Massachusetts, and it all revolved around speeding with the head of the state police and the highway safety. And it is top of mind for law enforcement and related communities right now, as people are out there just flying all over the place. So with that said, Tara, Woon, thank you so very much. You know, we're honored to have you with us. The foundation does great work. We're proud to be affiliated with you. Thank you both very much. And to everybody watching, have a great day. Stay safe.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks.